This is the City of Waupaca's City Plan Commission meeting.
Okay, welcome everybody to our November City Planning Commission meeting that we're holding in October. Today is October 26, 2020, and it's 5:23 p.m. I call this meeting to order. In attendance for commissioners, we have Keelan, Olson, Barrett, and Mayor Brian Smith. And we also have staff, Aaron Jensen, our city administrator, and Andrew Dane, economic development help planner. So, and Jeff Sanders is going to join us soon. And I see that we also have Neil Schmidt is over here in the corner. I'm assuming that's Neil, right?
That is correct.
Correct.
Hi, Neil.
Hello.
So I think that's all we have in attendance at this time. We would need a motion. When you approve the agenda, don't forget we had one addendum that we added to under number 2 action items, letter C, chapter 17 of the rewrite of the zoning code. So we need to add that to our agenda. We need a motion to approve.
I'll motion to approve with the addendum.
Olson to second.
We also have to consider the removal of item B.
Oh, yeah. Okay. So can we leave that on and then just table it? So remember to table it till the next meeting. Is that okay?
That's fine. Yep.
All right, let's do it that way. Any other discussion? All in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Against? Motion carried. Okay, and then let's just go right into the action items. This is a site plan review. Aaron, are you setting this up, or is this Andrew?
I'm going to set this up, and there's actually a decent amount to talk about. I'm going to try to take us through Jeff's and Justin's portion as well as mine. Let me share the screen real quick here. Okay, so this is a site plan review for Schmidt Boat Lifts and Docks, and this is a second building on their property. I'm going to try to get to the site plan here. Actually, let's just go to this. So this is a property on their current site. So this is their current site here, the existing building, 4,200 square feet, proposed building, or kind of a phase 2 of their project, 5,100 square feet. So you can kind of get an idea of what's going on there. Neil, because I know you can explain it better than I can. Neil, what you want to just speak to what you'll be using this building for, and then I'll go into the staff reports and everything.
Sure. What we found with the existing building, and it's worked out well, and the location has been doing good for us. And as things have grown, we've needed more space for storage, but we also need some more space for some further displays, some showroom area. So of this new building, a portion of it is just going to be unheated cold storage, we'll say unheated storage. The other portion is going to be insulated and finished as additional showroom.
Before we get into the staff reports, I'll kind of show you what's being proposed as far as, let's see if I can get a good picture of it. Let's see here. Maybe that was the best picture. So this would be the side facing the road. Awnings to match the current awnings on the primary building. Color scheme is the same. See the overhead door there. And then the other sides, north elevation, east, west. So I wanted to give you kind of a visual of that and the site plan before we get into Jeff's report that I'll take us through. Let's see if I can, there. So there's a lot to talk through here, and I'm going to take us through each one. So bear with me. One thing we found out when doing the review of this site is that there are quite a few things in this portion of the zoning code as far as, I don't want to call them restrictions, but things that any developer has to come into compliance with. And I'm going to go through each one by one. And in speaking with Jeff, obviously, as his role as a zoning administrator, his role is to outline in his staff report exactly what the zoning code says for this area. And he's done that, and he's marked some areas in which it's compliant, and he's marked some areas in which it isn't compliant. And we did have a kind of a pre-development meeting early last week. Was it early last week, Neil, or maybe 2 weeks ago? I think it was 2 weeks ago, to go through some of the concerns that were outlined in this report. Mr. Schmidt has addressed some of them, and then others. I am basically going to lean on kind of section 17.44 in the code in our ordinance that talks about Plan Commission's basis for approval. And I'm going to bring up some questions that came to my mind when going through this as to why they are or are not compliant. So the first one here is height limitation zones.
Aaron, Jeff, I'm in the meeting, by the way.
Hey, all right, Jeff's here. So I'm going to go ahead and let you go through the staff report, and then I'm going to address some things in the non-compliant sections, okay?
So I'm sorry, where did you leave off, Aaron?
I was just kind of setting up your staff report. So feel free to go through your staff report explanations, and then I'm going to address some things in the non-compliant areas that I want to speak to Plan Commission on and give at least some thoughts on it.
Sounds good. If you could scroll to midway down page 1 where we get into zoning ordinance.
Yep, right there.
Well, what I did here and what I try to do when the site plans are a little bit more complicated is let the staff report flow with the various sections of the zoning ordinance. So you start with the section that pops up first in the ordinance and you progress through that way. It can sometimes feel a little bit disjointed when you're reading it, but it's much easier for the owner and applicant when they're trying to match up the staff report with the actual zoning code. Potentially the same with Plan Commission members as well. So I apologize if it feels a little bit more herky-jerky that way, but it actually seemed to be a little bit smoother. So I know it's counterintuitive. So first of all, we're in a height limitation zone here. And the most important thing to keep in mind is height limitation zones are set by FAA. And it doesn't establish a maximum height for a structure. It establishes a maximum elevation for a structure. So the property in question lies between 834 and 838 feet above sea level. That's the ASL, above sea level. The height limitation zone for this property is 896 feet. So basically anything that goes up to but not above 896 feet ASL is compatible, and the structure that's being proposed at 28 feet, 6 inches give or take, will not exceed 870. So it's compliant with the height limitation zone and FAA requirements. Within the interchange zone district, there's some specific uses that are a little bit interesting because there's some kind of conflicts within the zoning ordinance. So retail uses less than 10,000 square feet in size are a special use in the B6 district. And Aaron, this is at the top of page 2. If you scroll down to the middle of that table, you'll see building size and minimum floor area. And the minimum floor area in the B6 is 10,000 square feet. Now, the existing structure out there is 4,200 square feet. So clearly that structure did not meet the minimum floor area. However, it was granted a special use permit under the section that you see up here above the table, section 17.23 sub 6 C1. The reason it's a little bit strange is that section refers to a use, but the building size refers to a structure, and it could be interpreted or perhaps misinterpreted as saying if you have a structure that is greater than 10,000 square feet, you can have a special use permit for a retail aspect of it that is less than 10,000 square feet, which in my opinion clearly is not what was intended by the Plan Commission at the time. So that's something that we will dress up in the existing ordinance. So even though it says no in compliance for a minimum floor area at 5,100 square feet, I think if the question is it compliant with the intent of the code? the answer is yes. And then there's this ambiguity thing that you've heard me discuss a few times in the past, where if there's any ambiguity in the interpretation of the code, the city basically has to defer to the free use of property, which means defer to the owner. Does that make sense before I go any farther? And can everybody hear me okay?
Yes.
I'll keep trucking along then. So there are a number of sections here that are specific to the proposed structure and other sections that deal with the site as a whole. This one here down at the bottom of page 2 is specific to the structure. And that is a minimum of 20% of all combined facades of the structure shall employ actual facade protrusions or recesses. You can read the rest of it. So basically what it's saying is any structure proposed within the B6 district cannot have effectively a flat facade and cannot have a unilevel roof, meaning a single level roof. There has to be differentiation within the roof itself, and that differentiation has to be at least 6 feet. So there have to be essentially, whether it be gables or other things, there has to be a 6 foot difference in the structure of the roof in one aspect or one element of the structure of the roof when compared to the remainder of the roof. As Aaron showed you a moment ago, the proposed structure does not comply with this section. The next section is specific to landscape and open space regulations. And again, this is a site plan requirement. The question to the Plan Commission is how much of this requirement should be imposed upon the site, given that a site plan was approved for this property in 2013. And that's a question that I think we'll probably be discussing in about 15 minutes or so. The same is true at the bottom for the bicycle and pedestrian elements of this. The restrictions in here, I think, as Aaron referred to it, or the requirements perhaps, are rather stringent for a property out by the interchange, but they are the requirements. And the proposed development as is right now doesn't comply with all of these requirements. You get down to the middle of page 4. We get into the East Gateway design requirements. So the East Gateway Design District is effectively an overlay, and it lays down on top of the B6 district. And there are specific requirements within the East Gateway design, let's call it the EGD from here on out. Particularly, landscape plans shall utilize native plant species. And again, we go back to that term that we've discussed in the past, shall versus should. So shall is an affirmative, it's a must, and it does mean that you have to use native plant species. It also says that common brick and common block are prohibited as exterior building surfaces, and that for non-industrial buildings, and this building that is proposed is non-industrial, the lower 3 feet of facade shall be constructed with face brick, textured block, or face brick stone. Again, the proposed structure here is non-compliant with this section. In terms of traffic, parking, and access, bottom of page 4 and top of page 5, Aaron, if you scroll to the table on the top of page 5, what we're looking at, whenever you have multiple uses within a given structure, you have to look at the parking requirements for each of those uses individually, and then it is the accumulation of the requirements that gives you the minimum parking spaces. So right now, and Mr. Schmidt can clarify this, but I believe there are 2 employees and they're posting for a 3rd position. So 1 to 3 employees within a warehouse use. And again, storage is the warehouse would be the closest thing to the storage use, would be 1 parking space. And then the retail office component is 1 parking space for every 300 square feet. So that'd be 10 parking spaces for a 3,000 square foot facility plus 1 for the employees, meaning there's a minimum requirement of 11 spaces. The site plan submitted has proposed 5 spaces, so that's not compliant. The size of the stalls proposed are 9 feet by 20 feet, and the size of the stalls requirement is 9 feet by 20 feet and proposed 10 feet by 18 feet. Now you see chapter 17.3203 sub I below. These are the requirements for parking landscape buffers. And you can read through that. I think we had this discussion with a couple other site plans that have come before us in the recent past. In terms of the site plan review submittal requirements, there are just a couple things that were missing, but I think Mr. Schmidt's going to be addressing those if he hasn't already. And that was exterior color elevations, signage information, and an indication of structures and uses on adjoining properties. Chapter 17.440 covers special uses, and this is where the Plan Commission has the authority to determine whether or not an amendment to the existing special use permit that was granted back in 2013 is required for this new structure. You've noticed, I'm going to find that bold language where if you notice on the middle of page 6, it says any subsequent changes to the approved plans or use shall be submitted for approval to the Plan Commission. And if in the opinion of the Plan Commission, such change or addition constitutes a substantial alteration based on the standards set forth, a public hearing before the Plan Commission shall be required. Now, the addition of a structure that is larger than the existing structure, in my opinion, would constitute a substantial alteration to the property. However, the conditions that were placed upon the existing structure under the special use permit granted in 2013, I question whether they would stand an Act 67 test today. So again, if you look at those 4 conditions laid out, many of them, a number of them basically say that you have to comply with existing city, county, and state law. That is effectively prohibited under Act 67 now. So I guess where I'm at on the special use permit is my recommendation is to not require a change to the existing special use permit because I don't believe that any change to it could be compliant with Act 67. And get to the last page. My recommendation is denial based upon the reasons cited in section 3. Just to go over that, it would be the landscape requirements that haven't been met, the bicycle requirements, and the parking and landscape buffer requirements. And I apologize for coming in late. I actually thought the meeting was at 5:30. Very sorry for that.
No problem, Jeff. So Jeff, I'm gonna take Plan Commission through a bunch of things I have highlighted, and I want to bring up some points for them to consider. And I'm just going to go through it as we did. So let's go through this again. Height limitations in airport vicinity. You already have that as compliant. We're good there. This next one was one that was non-compliant. It is a minimum of 20% of all the combined facades of the structure shall employ actual facade protrusions or recesses. So the question I want to bring up here is, I do not believe in the way we've looked at it, the original development in 2013 did not comply with this. And that was the primary structure. We're kind of looking at an accessory structure here. The question I bring up, Jeff, and to Plan Commission is if it wasn't required in the original development in 2013, should it be required now? That's one question I had here.
Yeah, and it's a good question, particularly the use of the word should. So from a pure compliance standpoint, the fact that it wasn't, I can broaden it because I think we're going to be addressing a couple other aspects of this staff report in a similar manner. And so let me say that there are aspects of the existing zoning ordinance and site plan review requirements that do not appear to have been fully complied with back in 2013. That predated my tenure with the city, so I have no explanation as to why that occurred. But the site plan was approved in 2013. Can the city in 2020 impose the breadth of these requirements because a new structure is being proposed for the property? The answer to that question very simply is yes, and there's no question about that. But the question Aaron asked was a little bit different, right? He asked whether we should, and that's a different kind of question. So from the perspective of the zoning administrator, it's hard to answer that, right? Because it's incumbent upon the zoning administrator to administer the ordinance as it's written today. From an ethical standpoint, a moral standpoint, whatever argument you want to use, through no fault of the owner, the site plan was approved back then. Is it fair to 7 years later, because a new structure is being proposed, retroactively enforce something that perhaps should have been enforced in 2013? And that's a policy question, not a zoning administrator question. So I think that's for the Plan Commission to decide.
Okay, so we'll let you guys think about that as we continue to go through this. I think it's I would have some similar questions on the next two. And one is landscaping and one is bicycle facilities. These are interesting because when you look back at the 2013 development, these were done to some capacity, just not all of them were completed. And, you know, specifically when we're talking about the bicycle facilities, you know, I can't say this for sure. I mean, part of my thinking is that, you know, this is pretty intensive stuff for bicycle facilities in this area. You know, it's something that maybe you'd see more in closer to a downtown area or something like that. You know, I couldn't help but think, was this part of the code developed for maybe what it was supposed to be in the future, you know, when there was a bunch of development out there, a bunch of traffic, and if it looked a lot different, you know, in 10 years than it did right away, would we want to have this out there? Possibly. I just think that, you know, it does look a lot like it did in 2013, and I question I mean, does this really fit that area? And like I said before, not all of this was completed in the original development in 2013. So the same question applies in my mind. Should we be requiring it in 2020 with phase 2? As we continue to go down the list here, East Gateway design requirements, a couple thoughts that came into my head. I think actually Mr. Schmidt stated that, you know, as far as utilizing native plantings, you know, he said that he was willing to do that. So one would be taken care of. The common brick and common block lower 3 feet of the facade shall be constructed with brick face, textured block, or brick stone. That is, again, in my mind, is a primary versus accessory building question. I don't think it's 100% clear whether it was meant for every building or just primary or maybe both primary and accessory, and it very well might have been. Those are things that pop into my head. So that's something to consider as we go through this as well. Traffic and parking areas, I can tell you that Mr. Schmidt did make a change here, so this is compliant now. You can see this is a little different site plan than that was in your packet. He added parking stalls to meet the 11 that are needed, and then he also changed them, him and Fox Builders changed them to the 9 by 20 feet. This does allow for a wide enough aisle here, and it meets standards all the way around. So that he has made a change and addressed. Site plan review, some of these things I believe have been addressed as well. There was some landscaping. Let's see here. Let's go to this. Compliance. Some of this, I think, if I'm not mistaken, I think some of this is kind of similar as well. Some of that parking lot in the past, like for example, I believe in somewhere here it says that the entirety of the parking lot is supposed to be kind of outlined by plantings, or that might have been in the landscaping section. But I do know Mr. Schmidt did propose, you know, landscaping in this portion around the building. He did state in our meeting that if Plan Commission felt like it was needed, that he'd be willing to plant some plantings over right in this portion of the site. He would want to have it further west because the further east we go, it gets into the snow removal area, and there's really nowhere to put it then. So that buffer would just be set further back off if Plan Commission felt that that was something that is needed. And I believe as I go through this, I think that's kind of all the things that I wanted to speak to. This is, I think, an important section in my mind. This is what I referenced before Jeff got on. Basis for approval. The Plan Commission and Common Council shall base their determination on general considerations as to the effect of such grant on the health, general welfare, safety, and economic prosperity of the city. I think the way I read into that, and I actually asked, because there's so much here, I actually did have a conversation with Attorney Hart today on this to make sure that, as we ask ourselves some of these questions and we act in a certain way, are we putting ourselves or Plan Commission at risk? And his general answer was that, if there's reasoning for it and Plan Commission's making a determination as they feel in the best interest of the city, they're covered, was my conversation with him. So those are the things I guess I wanted to bring up. I do know one of the reasons for that last one, that it wasn't compliant, was because Mr. Schmidt did not have a drainage plan originally, and that is in fact in the packet now. It was added later. He's worked with Falks Brothers, and I'll find it here somewhere. He has worked with Falks Brothers on this drainage plan to show where stormwater is running. So that was one of the reasons that last section was non-compliant. In the last week and a half, he has provided that. Justin and I were able to look at this today and talk to Falks Brothers, and Justin had no concerns. So that was a lot of talking. Apologize. I guess I'll open it up to Plan Commission for thoughts, comments.
I have a question for Jeff, an opinion, if you would render, please. If Mr. Schmidt were to delay his application until after a new zoning ordinance is in place, like the one we're considering, do you think he would still be non-compliant on these issues?
That's a good question, Alder Keelan, and the answer is yes. We did not propose any changes to the B6 district or the East Gateway design overlay. So the standards today would apply after we adopt the amended ordinance.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
This is Eric Olson. I'd like to, I guess, ask Mr. Schmidt which of these things that he's non-compliant with are giving him the most anxiety or difficulty meeting?
That's a good question. I guess the way I took this plan, or the plan that you have, and what I'm trying to do is meet the needs that I have, but on the same, and try and do it as closely to what we had, while also keeping costs in mind. It is ultimately the main reason we started down this road was for a storage building. And then it's kind of expanded a little bit from there. So I guess that's a difficult question, but just trying to balance the two things with obviously I want this to be a nice looking building. I want the district to remain a nice looking area. But I also feel like us building a building out there, I'd like to get more traffic out there and more people out there. So hopefully as we continue to grow that will do that and continue to develop that area.
All right, so there's nothing specific then that is giving you the most pause with what we discussed?
I guess I don't understand. What do you mean?
Well, I mean, you heard the discussion. You heard what I guess we're saying is non-compliant. Does it come down to which one is the most expensive for you to do? Or, I mean, we're trying to make it, I guess, in my opinion, we're thrilled that you want to build this building and we want to do everything we can to help you. But I'm just trying to get in your head, I guess, to see what where your difficulties lie?
Yeah, some of it, I would say, yeah, a chunk of it is cost, and I've tried to make if good questions that they've had and good things that were brought up. I tried to make some changes that I thought would help out and can get us compliant in areas where it doesn't, that we can do it reasonably. We corrected the parking situation. I guess, to be honest with you, the bicycle part of it, in the years since 2013, when we built the first building and put in the bike rack, I don't think it's ever got used. And maybe down the road it will be, but it hasn't been so far. And again, as a company, if we see that down the road we're getting a lot of people that want that, we're going to accommodate that. We changed and added some landscaping. The new narrative shows that we're going to use native plants, and we extended the landscaping around the building. There are tree clusters, that a couple of them that are planted out there. That was our out on the side of the building. That was our answer for that back when we built originally. As I guess, being realistic, it's the frontage that you want and being on the highway. So that's where we don't want to come too far forward. And I guess one other question you had about signage was basically because it's a accessory building at this time, we aren't requiring or asking for any signage at this time.
So I'm just going to bring up a point just to kind of wrap up some of my take on this. Jeff, I just want to make sure I understand this correctly. I mean, we can, with the exception of what I would say, I think the stonework or the brick on the bottom third or whatever it was, the first 3 feet of the building, if we approved this site plan, maybe with the exception of that part of it, I mean, it would, if I'm not mistaken, it would have everything that first plan in 2013 had. I mean, it would be, I guess it would be in step with what was approved there, as I understand this, as I look at it. It wouldn't be all that different from what happened at that time.
And I apologize, Aaron, I'm not sure I understood the question. So does the existing, the structure that was built in 2013, does that have that 3-foot brick facade element?
It does. Well, it has like cultured stone.
Okay. Yeah, again, it's from the perspective of the zoning ordinance, the interpretation of the code, the way it's written right now, would say that building, the zoning ordinance does not differentiate between principal structures and accessory structures explicitly. Most zoning ordinances do. Most zoning ordinances recognize that there are typically higher architectural design requirements placed upon a principal structure than there are in an accessory structure. An example I think that all of us would understand is when you think about a single family dwelling in a detached garage, the detached garage should be complementary to the house, but generally you don't have the same level of architectural detail, windows and facade enhancements and things like that. And I think that's pretty standard across most zoning ordinances in commercial and industrial districts as well. I don't know what the intent of the Plan Commission was back in 2013, or back when the B6 district requirements and the East Gateway district requirements were written, but I wouldn't be surprised to find that it wasn't intended for accessory structures to be held to the same stringent requirements as principal structures. So with that very qualifying language, my response is the way the ordinance is written right now says that it must have facade protrusions, the differentiation in the roof, and the 3-foot brick, stone, etc. And I suspect that 3-foot thing, if added, would actually comply with the facade projection requirement. So that one would be a 2 birds, 1 stone issue.
Sure.
But again, I think it feels to me that there's a part of these 2 sections of the zoning ordinance that may not represent the intent of the Plan Commission at the time. And if I'm wrong on that, then it's interpret and enforce the ordinance in front of us. If I'm correct, it does seem, I could understand a question as to if it wasn't required of us in 2013, why is it required of us now? It's a valid question. It's not necessarily a legally defensible question, but it's a valid question. And I apologize to the Plan Commission for not answering that question more directly. That's the best I can do given the circumstances.
What options do we have to move forward in approving this?
Well, Alder Keelan, if that question is directed at me, I think what I would say is the section that Aaron brought up before I started talking again, the section that basically says basis for approval, the Plan Commission and Common Council shall. Based upon the way that section is written, and then certainly based upon Attorney Hart's interpretation, I think the Plan Commission has considerable latitude in determining how to proceed here.
So, Jeff, if we were to move forward with this, with the number of items that are non-compliant here, how does that affect us in any future projects that might happen out there, and how we handle those?
Yeah, it's an excellent question, Mr. Mayor. I guess one way for me to respond would be any future development that occurs within the B6 district, the East Gateway district, or any place else for that matter. All I can say is I'm going to do the best to the best of my ability, do what the zoning ordinance says. And the way the zoning ordinance is written, there are requirements that should have been placed upon, and let me backtrack on that. Were I reviewing the proposal that was approved in 2013 under the zoning regulations that I see before me now, I would have required everything that you see in the staff report before you. And since it would have been effectively greenfield first-time development, I don't know that an argument could be made against those full requirements. Given, however, that the city of Waupaca approved a site plan for this property in 2013, so 7 years ago, under what I believe to be exactly the same regulations before us today, I do believe that there is a valid argument that the owner could make regarding the equity of potentially compelling compliance 7 years after the fact. So what I perhaps didn't clearly state earlier when I was introducing the staff report is I think there's 2 elements to my report. There are those aspects of it that are specific to the proposed new structure, and then there are those aspects that are broader in scope, site plan, the site as a whole in scope. I think with respect to the former, the Plan Commission moving away from the requirements of the zoning ordinance has potentially greater risk in terms of not so much setting a precedent, but having somebody say, well, why are you making me do this when you didn't make them do that? I think that would be stronger for the specific aspects of this report and the zoning ordinance oriented around the building that's proposed. I think when it gets to those more site-oriented things, the bicycle stuff, the broader landscaping, I suspect it would be tougher to win that argument. I think the Plan Commission, Common Council are at much less risk, if not no risk at all, moving forward with the proposal before you.
Jeff, this kind of goes to Mayor Smith's question as well, I believe. And I think this has come to light in the last two and a half weeks. We're obviously in the middle of a zoning code update. As an economic development director, or acting as that, and a city administrator, I have a lot of concerns with some of the things that are written in this area moving forward and possibly being a detriment to development in this area for the next 10, 15 years. We only get one shot at this. I know this didn't come up in the first time, but I can't help but ask, I mean, is that something that in your eyes should be revisited here as we're in this process and taken a little closer look at?
Sure. I mean, from the perspective of an urban planner, if I can, step away from the zoning administrator role for a moment, the requirements that are in place for the B6 district in general, and certainly the East Gateway district, are pretty stringent. I mean, not necessarily too stringent. That's a policy question. That's up to the plan commissions and the common council to decide. But they're standards that I think most planners and zoning administrators would see in a town core or a village center or a downtown in a city. Now, if that was the intent of creating the B6 district and the East Gateway district, saying, it's going to grow over time, it's going to develop over time, and we want it to be this kind of special place over time, then I think the argument for keeping the standards as they are probably stands. I didn't propose any changes to it because, frankly, I wasn't aware, and perhaps I should have asked, but I wasn't aware that there were any concerns about the, perhaps potentially too strict requirements in that area. But as we've discussed, we do know that there's going to be a second round of revisions coming after the comp plan's adopted. And perhaps when Andrew is on later this evening talking about the comp plan, we might ask if he has anything particular in mind for the gateway area that could result in perhaps a modification to the existing standards. So again, I apologize for answering the way I am. I'm trying to choose my words carefully because I wasn't involved in the decisions that led to the development of the standards in that district at the time. So I don't want to question the intent that was in place at the time. Hope that not like I'm CYAing myself too much.
So, I mean, looking at this project, I know we had some discussion during the original phase of the very first phase of this project, and I don't remember specifics, but I do know that there was some compromising that was done between the city and the city planning commission and the developer here. I mean, when I look at something like this, I always look at the concept that, is this a good project? Is this a project that's going to help this business to continue to grow? And I think I answer yes to both of those. So I'm a little concerned that we are not going to be able to approve this, maybe because of people not really understanding what was going to happen out in the East Gateway, and something that was written maybe 15 to 20 years ago doesn't apply today. And I'm not saying everything needs to be changed here, but it does seem like, I mean, if this is a project that I really felt like it didn't fit, and it was, and it wasn't meeting any of the goals that we were trying to do out there, then I would say, it's a pretty easy answer. But this is not an easy answer here at all. Does that make sense at all?
Mm-hmm.
So what do we have to do? I mean, I can't speak for Alan or Eric or Tracy or even staff for that matter. But I mean, if we want to try and work with Neil to get this project to proceed, what do we need to do?
So if you don't mind, Mayor, I'm going to have I know Jeff has his recommendation as a zoning administrator. You know, I guess my recommendation as a city administrator is probably a little different than Jeff's. And I would say I recommend approving the site plan based off of that it's consistent with what we did in 2013. I will say with the exception of the cultured stone and the 3 feet on the bottom of that building. And that's a decision, you know, is that something we want to see? Is that something we feel like is important on the south facing side of that building? Or because it's an accessory structure, is it not? You know, and I think that's the reason that we went back in the code and tried to see what ability does Plan Commission have if they think it's a good project for the business, for the city. Do they have an ability to use some judgment on this? And I think that's what I called Tom Hart for today. And the answer I got was that Plan Commission does, in fact, if they feel that the project warrants it. And if they don't,
Aaron, can you show the picture of what that? I think you had a picture that was kind of in color there that showed what that building would look like, and which one would be? So that would be the south, right?
That's correct.
Okay, and then so what's at the bottom of the building there? That's the darker color. Is that just metal that's painted a different color?
That's correct.
Okay. And then on the current building, he had to put on like either a brick facade or something that looked like fake brick or real brick or whatever you want to call it. Sorry for the way I explained that. Okay. All right.
That's
so,
right.
and your question there is, Aaron, is that do we believe that, you know, this accessory building should also have a brick facade on there like the original, like the first building does?
That is correct. I think that in my eyes, the way I view this whole thing, that's the one thing that I see being different from 2013 to this one.
And
Okay.
that's it. Right?
Yes, that's all. Yes.
Okay. And so let me ask, I'll let you guys talk again here too, but so the rest of the building is going to look exactly like that. So where the windows are and where the doorway are, they're going to have that much glass around them. They're going to have what is that? Like an awning up above the red? Is like an awning that sticks out?
Yes,
Correct.
it's like a canvas awning.
Yeah. Okay. All right. And so that darker area that's at the bottom of the building, how many feet is that go up the side of the building? Is that 3 feet?
Yes.
Or 30 inches or something like that? Somewhere in between there? I'm just guessing, but. Okay.
Right, about there. I'd have to find out for sure, get a scale out, but somewhere about there.
Okay.
I think it says 40, if I'm not mistaken, 40 inches.
So it's a pretty high building then. So. Yeah. So, you know, and all right. So I guess my thought is that this looks pretty nice the way it is, considering it's just an accessory building and it is in an industrial type area. I mean, I don't know what you can do. I don't even know if you could really match what he had on the original building, and would that look worse than just leaving it like this? So
I think I agree with you, Mayor, wholeheartedly.
yeah.
And I do too. Is this something that would have to go to council?
It is not. Site plan approvals just done by Plan Commission.
Yeah, Aaron, can I jump in for a moment again?
Yes, sir.
Mr. Mayor, back to the question, you alluded to the concept of precedent, and precedent comes into play when we're talking about decisions that are arbitrary over time, right? So we make one decision at one point in time, and we make a different decision on basically the same circumstances at a different point in time. So if the Plan Commission feels that the requirements, facade, the roof, the protrusions, were intended for the principal structure and not necessarily intended for the accessory structures, we certainly want to clean that up and clear that up in the ordinance. That's the most important thing. So whether we do it right now or whether we address it after the comp plan is adopted, we definitely want to clear that up. But in the interim, between now and whenever that time occurs, the Plan Commission can, as a policy, state that there are different standards that apply to accessory structures than they do to principal structures, and that was the presumed intent of the zoning ordinance when it was written. And as long as you maintain that policy over time, in a non-arbitrary, non-capricious way with other development, there will be no negatives associated with it. If anybody in the past was required to go take these extra steps on a garage or a storage structure, some other accessory structure, they may have cause to argue a bit. But going forward, as long as you maintain the policy over time, you're protected. So I suspect that's probably what Attorney Hart was referring to. The discretion exists, and as long as you use that discretion fairly over time, I don't see any harm coming. Hope that helps.
It does. I'm thinking of some projects that we've done in the past, that maybe were just accessory buildings that we did require some kind of fascia on the front or the whatever's facing the road, as I would call it, or the street. But nothing, I don't think, out in the East Gateway area.
Is that the key there, Jeff? I'm assuming that in that zoning district?
I mean, that would be the argument, right? Right now we're not reviewing a project in some other district. It's in the B6 district. It's under the East Gateway design requirements. I think I certainly agree both with the mayor and with Mr. Schmidt that the proposed structure complements the existing structure. Whether they're exactly the same or not, from a design standpoint, a policy standpoint, it doesn't bother me too much. And again, the way the ordinance is written, it uses strict language and it's written with a lot of shalls. I do believe the Plan Commission has some discretion. It's just up to the Plan Commission to decide whether to use it and how to use it.
Yeah, the only ones I could think of are more in like a residential area or in between, type thing. So yeah.
Right. What about the Lutheran Church? We did that with their accessory structure, right? But that's right in the middle of town, like you're saying.
Yeah, it's in a residential area.
Yeah, that's not a B6.
Yep.
Yeah.
So it's not apples to apples.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah, I know. If that's the only thing that we're concerned about, Aaron, and that's something that Mr. Schmidt doesn't feel that he, well, again, whether he wants to do it or not, that's up to him, I guess. But I think it looks fine just the way it is, and I would be fine with approving the site plan review or site plan with that concept.
Okay. I think this is your question, but since you said that, is that a motion?
That was what I was going to say too.
Yeah, I don't think I have ever made a motion at city planning, but I think I am a voting member, aren't I?
You are.
Okay, so I will make that motion then.
I'll second it. Olson.
All right, we have a motion by the mayor, a second by Eric Olson, that we approve the site plan for Walter Vincent Leasing LLC, DBA Schmidt Boat Lifts and Dock Incorporated at 2229 Runway Drive. Any further discussion? All in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Against? Anybody that would like to abstain? Motion carried. All right,
Awesome.
Neil, good luck. Hey, when do you plan, are you still planning on doing that this fall?
Yeah, the folks would like to get started this week, taking the topsoil off and starting to get moving.
All right, and he can do that now, Jeff and Aaron?
That's correct.
Okay. All right, awesome. Well, good.
He's waiting on a building permit, but he did get permission to start early on a slab. So he's been working with Jane and Elizabeth on that.
All right, sounds good. Well, good luck to you, Neil.
Well, thank you very much, guys. We appreciate it, and hope to meet you in person someday.
Yeah.
That would be nice, wouldn't it?
Thanks, Neil.
All right, thank you. Have a good evening.
Yeah,
You
you
too.
too.
You too.
Okay, so can we have a motion to table the site plan review for Reynolds Prestel Products Incorporated?
Mrs. Allen, so moved.
I'll second. Tracy.
Motion by Alan, second by Tracy, that we table the site plan review for Reynolds Prestel Products Incorporated at 1999 Royalton Street. Discussion? All in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Against? Anybody that would like to abstain? All right, motion carried. Aaron, I suppose you're doing multiple duties here tonight, then you're writing down the notes too, huh?
I am. I got the minutes sheets from Justin.
All right, good. Let's go to discussion items then. We have, and actually,
Actually, Mayor, sorry,
we
we
got
have
the
that.
other one. Yeah,
We
sorry.
have that addendum. That's an action item.
All right, let's go to the letter C, which is the addendum, and this is the Chapter 17 rewrite. Go ahead, Aaron or Jeff.
Yeah, let's go ahead. So I'll set it up just for a second. I know in our public hearing that went to, was right before our last council meeting, we did have some public comment, public input that was from Mr. Walter, Rick Walter, and Jeff and I were able to meet with him shortly after, later that week, address all of his questions, concerns. But I do know council wanted to push it back to Plan Commission to kind of address those same things. Plus, I believe Jeff has another thing he wants to discuss. So without taking any more time, Jeff, I'll turn it over to you.
Sure. As Aaron mentioned, he and I met with Mr. and Mrs. Walter, Mr. and Ms. Walter, I should say, remotely and walked through some of the questions. So during the council hearing, Mr. Walter brought up and these issues were primarily associated with the B7 district, the Riverfront district. I'll just kind of go over those issues quickly, and then we can kind of wrap up the discussion that we had. One was he had concerns regarding the new, the draft zoning ordinance allows for offices and professional offices within the B7 district. His concerns are that the intent of the B7 district was for more of a 24/7 kind of commercial oriented district, shopping, restaurants, that sort of thing, and that offices may not be consistent with that intent. He raised the same question regarding places of worship, essential services, indoor recreation, commercial. And then he had two other comments that were related to B7, but kind of broader in scope, and that's amateur radio towers and the item that we wrote into the tail end of the uses that said the Plan Commission has the discretion to determine that a use not listed in the zoning ordinance that in its opinion is substantially the same as an existing use or a listed use can approve it. You may recall the example I used when we first talked about this a couple of months ago, and I also used with Mr. and Ms. Walter, was the donut shop, bagel shop argument. That if you have donut shop listed as a permitted use and somebody wants to propose a bagel shop, the answer could be no, because bagel shops aren't listed. Or the Plan Commission could say, you know something, bagel shops and donut shops are substantially the same and we're going to approve it. Mr. and Ms. Walter's concern was that there was enough. They questioned whether there was a little bit too much leeway there to approve things that might not be compatible with the B7 district and other districts. And my response basically was that's a determination by the Plan Commission. It would be, a policy that would evolve over time. To go back to some of the comments then, the B7 district in its current form, in the current ordinance, actually allows for offices and professional offices as uses permitted by right. So it's not a change in any way. The same is true for essential services. And just so you know, essential services are things like sewer and water, electric, phone, gas, other kind of utilities. And then indoor recreation commercial is a use that's also permitted by right. So these aren't changes to the proposed ordinance. The ones that are changes are places of worship and amateur radio. The concern that Mr. and Ms. Walter had regarding places of worship was that, parking and other issues related to churches, temples, mosques, synagogues, and like could be problematic in that district. And I just pointed out that there is a federal law called the Religious Land Use and Institutionalized Persons Act, which basically says local government cannot be more stringent or more strict in reviewing and approving places of worship than it would other commercial uses. So if you have a district like the B7 district that allows for a variety of commercial uses, which it does, retail, artisan manufacturing, dining, taverns, bars and such, we have to be able to allow a church to do the same thing. Now, could you have a 1,000-member congregation church or other place of worship there? Of course not. The scale's not appropriate. But there are many places of worship that have congregations of far, far fewer people. So when we talked about that, they were perfectly comfortable moving forward. And when it comes to amateur radio is a protected use under federal law, specifically from a emergency response and kind of national emergency standpoint. The argument is that when all systems fail, when digital communications fall, when satellite communications fall, when everything goes, there'll still be amateur radio, ham radio out there, and that would be the link to provide defense and all that kind of stuff. So federal government basically says you cannot prohibit ham radios and amateur radio operators from zoning districts, residential zoning districts. The final comment that they had, and this is something that wasn't brought up at council. Actually, Aaron, I should say the final comment I remember them having, Aaron may remember one or two that I forgot. Their concern is regarding the owner occupancy requirement in the live work and live rent units. So under the current ordinance and under the amended ordinance, the first floor, either the commercial front or the residential rear of the first floor must be owner occupied. And what I said to Mr. and Ms. Walter is that in the process of updating the comp plan, my understanding is that Andrew's going to be recommending a much more mixed use orientation for the downtown that could end up resulting in the B7 district and the B2 Central Business District, or at least some portions of the B2 district, being combined or merged into a convention or a more traditional mixed use district. And in a mixed use district, a building can be owned by one person. You can have a multi-story building owned by one person that is occupied by residential, office, and commercial uses as renters. There's no inherent conflict in zoning or in land use with that. And I suggested to him that perhaps that's something they would want to follow as the comp plan process goes forward and as that second round of zoning amendments occurs. So those were the issues that were raised. I think it was a good discussion. The impression I had was that their concerns were addressed. Aaron, did I miss anything? It seems to me there was one other thing that slipped my mind, but perhaps there wasn't.
You covered everything in my notes, and I would agree. To kind of sum it up, I think Mr. and Mrs. Walter were, I think that they felt like their questions were addressed, and they didn't have a push for any changes beyond, well, not beyond anything. I think Jeff explained to them the reasoning for all of it, and they seemed satisfied with those answers.
As Aaron alluded to, there was, should we jump on to the next one?
Yeah, sure.
So I'm trying to, actually, Aaron, if you don't mind introducing the Alder Chestnut comments, and I'll kind of flesh it out, because I'm actually making some notes in memory right now.
Yes, so Alder Chestnut had some comments. She had a meeting with us on Friday, virtual meeting with Jeff and I, and had some comments on the Fulton Street corridor overlay district. And wanted to make sure primarily that, the things that now are possibly allowed in the Fulton Street corridor, that they aren't just going to be automatically allowed, to sum this up. And Jeff, feel free to jump in whenever, but what we explained to her and what Jeff primarily explained to her is that the site plan review the site review process that has to be in play when doing when allowing a use like that would be considered a conditional use in the Fulton Street overlay district, gives the city, gives Plan Commission substantial ability to make requirements of that site that mitigates the negative impacts that use may present in that area. We all know that we're looking at using places like, we got big box retail stores that I guess the movement across the country is to allow for different uses and not be so stringent, to make sure that these types of facilities are utilized again and don't sit there as gray fields for 20 years. We know that those uses may not have been the perfect fit as we saw it 15 years ago. And because we realize that, we can control the negative impacts through site plan review. And I think that was, the biggest thing that Alder Chestnut had to say, and wanted to make sure that was done. And I know that's something we've talked about here on Plan Commission before, but we did have that meeting. We did want to bring it up because that was received.
Yeah, I think Aaron hit it. Alder Chestnut had a lot of questions about the nuts and bolts of this proposed overlay, and things that you as Plan Commission members have gone through. We've gone through those discussions quite a bit over the course of the last few months. I think if we were to boil it down to the more specific concerns, it was oriented around transit and transportation safety. She was, I think, unquestionably supportive of actions that transition the corridor from kind of a vehicular get in and get out quickly thing to something that was more accommodating of pedestrians and bicyclists and seniors and all that kind of thing. But the inevitable question arises that when you talk about a multimodal transportation corridor of the future, but you're looking at the corridor that is today, it can be hard to connect those two, right? Because clearly the way the West Fulton Street corridor is laid out right now is not particularly conducive to pedestrians, either walking along it or trying to cross. And as both Alder Chestnut and Aaron pointed out, at numerous places through that corridor, if you're intent upon making a left turn, you may have to put your feet up and relax for a while before that opportunity presents itself. And what I said or suggested to Alder Chestnut is that in the site plan review process, we'll be dealing with each proposed development, each proposed change in land use on a case-by-case basis within this framework that we've talked about, multi-use, compatibility, design and landscaping, and multimodal transportation. But that a key element of the long-term success of this corridor will be changes in infrastructure, right? And I think when you as a Plan Commission members, you as a Plan Commission, and Aaron and I have talked about this, I think although we probably didn't get into the real details of it, clearly the transportation system is going to evolve over time if this overlay is to come to fruition, right? If that reimagined corridors to come to fruition, and whether that's through tax increment financing or other tools, I think will be decided in the future. But I think again, the conversation when the conversation concluded, Alder Chestnut seemed very satisfied with the discussion. I would argue quite supportive. I think unquestionably supportive of the concept, But she has, specific issues that we'll have to address as we go forward.
So I think the moral of the story in those, I don't think there was any real changes that either party was looking for. Just explaining, and you guys, being through 7 meetings, hearing this stuff, we totally expected people to ask for a little better understanding. So that's kind of the process we felt that was. I know Alderman Keeland had an email that he received just before this. Alan, do you feel like now's an appropriate time to go through that?
Well, actually, I wanted to talk about something else first, but also let me go on to that. As I looked at the message again, I think it probably really is more a compliance issue with existing code than it is something for the City Plan Commission to have to discuss. The email you're saying? Yeah, the email.
Yeah, that's totally fair. And I think that we would have no problem giving that individual a call and talking with.
I think that'd be more appropriate. Yeah.
Perfect.
But getting back to the zoning code rewrite, frankly, I was surprised when I looked at the new draft prior to the last council meeting. I thought that we had said we were going to delete satellite antenna completely from the new zoning ordinance, but I see that it did surface in a revised version, Jeff, and I wanted to speak to that.
Alderman Keelan, could you elaborate on that?
I'm sorry, pardon me?
Could you elaborate on that a bit? Did you say delete satellite?
I thought that we had agreed at the last City Plan Commission meeting that we were going to delete the satellite antenna issue completely. Maybe I misunderstood that.
I'm opening up the zoning code right now. I mean, we had this.
Page 41.
Thank you. We had discussions about how many would be required where, and whether you'd have satellite dishes for each unit, limit 1 per unit. I know there was a discussion about whether the 18 inches or the 24 inches was sufficient in terms of size. I apologize, I don't recall a discussion about actually deleting it from the code.
Well, in the rewrite now, you've put a limitation of 34 inches on in diameter, which
and that was the request of. Go ahead. Sorry.
Yeah, which DirecTV and Dish both could comply with, but you also said that no more than 1 satellite dish per dwelling unit is allowable on the lot. So if for some reason I wanted both Dish and DirecTV, I couldn't do it on my property. And it seems to me it's a little anti-competitive.
Absolutely. I think that interpretation is not the anti-competitive part, but the interpretation of only 1 dish per unit is correct. And I apologize. That was my understanding of the wishes of the Plan Commission. If that's incorrect, we need to make that change.
And also, I've seen dishes mounted on the sides of houses, not necessarily on the property itself, and that's looks like a prohibition also.
Is that something the rest of Plan Commission is in agreement of? Is Alan's interpretation correct as far as, I guess, removing the prohibition of having more than 1?
Well, go ahead, Alan. I'm sorry. I'll let you finish.
I was going to say that the minutes from that meeting aren't really very specific about addressing that issue, but I really thought that we had agreed to delete any prohibitions on satellite dishes. Now, it's really not that big a thing, I guess, in the grand scheme of things, but I was just surprised by it.
I misinterpreted your original statement. I thought you, I apologize. I thought you said delete satellite dishes, not, I'm probably staring right at it, but I don't see a prohibition against attaching satellite dishes to structures. Well,
I guess I've got to look at, Hang on a second. I got to find it again. Oh, okay. This is 2A. Satellite dishes no larger than 34 inches in diameter may be located in the street yard. All other satellite dishes shall be located in the side or rear yard only. So to me, that implies that you can't attach it to a house. It has to be in the yard itself.
Okay, good question. That is not correct. They can be attached to the structure, but they can't be attached to the structure in the street yard or the street yard side of the structure.
Well,
And the other thing that came up is that if for some reason DirecTV or Dish decides now they need to have a 35-inch antenna in order to get decent signal during a rainstorm or whatever, now we have essentially prohibited that from the street yard. And as I said before, the only place that I could get a satellite signal was in the street yard at my location. So I don't know if that's an issue worth arguing about or not, but it just struck me as kind of odd.
so I'm a little confused about the street yard part of it, but let me go back to the number of satellites. This might be a little self-serving for me, but you know, having some rental units in town and just I mean, we have a duplex where we have 5 satellites on our roofs, you know, and obviously, well, not all of them are being used. I mean, at the most, 2 of them are being used. So I do, and the funny part about it is that, and I don't know if it's direct or dish, so excuse me if I use one that's false, but so DirecTV had the service there. We had a new tenant come in. So Dish put a satellite up there. That tenant left. New tenant came in. DirecTV was then hired again, and they put another new satellite up there. So now we have 2 DirecTVs and 1 Dish network. You know, I mean, so I actually like the idea of limiting the number of dishes to one site. I'm assuming there's an exception to just about everything we have, but I think that probably covers 99.9% of the people in town. I do have concerns about where you can put a satellite, though, because I know that there are situations where you can only put it one place on the property for it to actually work. And I've seen that happen in multiple places, too. So it might end up, and I know we had this discussion, it might end up on the street side of the house, whether it's on the roof or whether it's on the porch or whether it's in the front yard. It could end up there, and I think we have to allow that.
Right. So, and that's correct, Mr. Mayor. I did amend the ordinance to allow for satellite dishes in the street yard. So right now it says satellite dishes no larger than 34 inches in diameter may be located in the street yard. All other satellite dishes shall be located in the side or rear yard only. So basically it's saying that large, I don't even know if anybody does those big, large satellite dishes anymore, but anything beyond 34 inches would have to be side or rear yard. But the traditional Dish network and DirecTV satellite could be in the street yard now.
But you could only have one at a time.
That's correct. The way the ordinance is written right now, it is 1 satellite dish per dwelling unit. And if somebody were, let's say, under contract to DirecTV and wanted to switch to Dish Network, they would have to, once the Dish Network antenna was installed, they would have to remove the DirecTV satellite.
Now,
I know another alder person brought up the fact that a property in this individual's district had multiple satellite dishes in it, and none of them were connected anymore, and a couple of them were rusted, and it was that was the basis for that argument.
well, in my case, I've got a DirecTV antenna in my front yard, the street yard, and the post is set in concrete. Now, I suppose that the dish can be removed from the post, but that would seem to be rather burdensome to have to remove that and put a dish antenna somewhere else.
Valid point, and all I would say is on this issue, as with almost all issues not directed by federal law, this is a policy decision. It's up to those of you on the council to make a recommendation to, excuse me, those of you on the commission to make a recommendation to the council. So if there's a recommendation from the Plan Commission to amend section 17.303, I would be happy to amend it to your pleasure.
Well, again, I already gave my opinion. I think there should only be one per unit on there. I mean, I appreciate Alan's comments, but I think it's a very minor amount of people that could affect. So, I don't know, Eric or Tracy, if you want to weigh in.
I tend to agree with you, Mayor. I think keeping the one makes sense.
Yeah, I agree too. I think you probably nailed it, that it's only a very small percentage that would have more than one. I don't think too many people want to have more than one because it's an eyesore. So I don't know if it's a big deal or not, but there should be something written to limit them.
Well, the proposed ordinance has that already. As I said, I was just surprised to see it back in there and include it. I thought we had agreed to not do anything with satellite antennas.
Oh, okay.
So if I'm hearing that correctly, the majority thinks that we should keep it as is. Is that correct?
Yep. Good discussion, though.
Yeah.
Yeah. Leave it.
Hey, can I go back to just real quick, and I know this meeting's getting long already, but if we go back to the Walters concerns down on Main Street, just a couple of comments. One, I remember when this B7, is that right? The waterfront B7? Yeah.
Yep.
When that first came forward, in that original ordinance, or when it came forward, it did disallow offices in the B7 district, and that was something that the City Planning Commission said, hey, wait a second, that's not our intent there. So it's not like we haven't heard that before, and at least last time the City Planning Commission said, no, that's not the case. And then the second thing, and Jeff, you tell me this a couple of times already, and now I can appreciate it, but when you're talking about living and working, where you have somebody living in part of the live work and somebody else renting the office, somebody's living in one part and there's an office in the other one that somebody else is renting, or the owner, whatever the case might be. I remember the discussion on this too, why we were pretty careful on how we did it, but I think they're different situations. They talked about, from a building inspection purpose, if you had somebody that was renting, let's say the storefront, and then somebody that was in the back that was living in the residential part, then the building would have to be set up separately to allow, so that there would be, an entrance and an exit for both. So.
Mm-hmm.
But again, that's something different than zoning, obviously, right?
That's correct. And I think the policy question that will be part of the comp plan update process is, how amenable is the city to a traditional or a true mixed use district? Now, we've talked about that quite a bit with Fulton Street Corridor, and thus far, I think the Plan Commission and those people who weighed in on it seem relatively supportive. The downtown is where this kind of mixed use district. If we went back in time, I'm not sure how far back we would go. Downtown Waupaca would have been a mixed use district. There would have been buildings that had people living on the top floor and maybe an office on the second floor, and who knows what on the first floor. That's the way almost all downtowns existed at one point in time. And then the people who do what I do back then decided that you need to make sure everything was separated, and effectively killed downtowns. The downtowns that are thriving right now, I think, for lots of reasons, and certainly Andrew Dane can weigh in on this probably better than I, but they're those places that have a dynamic 24/7 environment. There are people living there, there are people working there, and the people who are working there might be selling stuff. They might be office, attorneys and doctors and whatever the case may be. If that's the vision that the city has for the central business district, I think it would be kind of interesting to have that kind of flexibility on one side of the street, but then this more rigid interpretation of this live work setting in the B7 district. So I think the argument, I don't recall who brought this up, but I think one of you did on the Plan Commission was, how do you explain to someone on this side of the street that they can, but on that side of the street that they can't? Well, that's the way zoning districts work, right? District boundaries have boundaries and the rules are different. But when you're talking about two sides of a main street, I think it's a more valid argument. And again, from a planning standpoint, I have no concerns with a very dynamic mixed use downtown Waupaca. From a policy standpoint, it'll be up to you and up to the council to decide whether that's the vision you have.
Okay, thanks. Hey, one other thing, and this goes back to the email that you shared with us earlier, Alan. Aaron, before you call, talk to me probably tomorrow. I'll be in tomorrow or Thursday, because I have some background on that and the use that they have there. So I can help you out a little bit there.
Mr. Mayor, would it be acceptable for me to be in on that call as well?
Sure, absolutely. Be awesome.
All right. Sounds good. We'll plan on that for tomorrow. Jeff, we'll give you a call.
Sounds good.
Okay, so it looks like anything else that has to do with the zoning rewrite, Chapter 17 rewrite. If not, I think we have to recommend back to council the Chapter 17 rewrite. It doesn't look like we made any changes, though, did it? Does it?
Well, I think that in view of our discussion on the B6 district and secondary and primary structures, I think there might need to be some tweaking on that before we go back to council. And Jeff, I think you've done a great job here. I didn't mean to, I hope I didn't belabor it too much, but I do think we need to tweak the B6 stuff or any other districts where that might apply.
So can I come up with, I think to Alan's point, I think that's a good point, especially if we can make a really slight tweak now, Jeff, to call out that accessory structure part. And then if we can if we feel like it's important to make a more comprehensive change to the East Gateway design standards in that B6 district, doing that as a part of after the comp plan might be more appropriate. But that's just my thoughts. If people want to take a deeper dive into that before that second revision, that's fine. The only reason I say that is because we're not going to get any likely not going to get any building projects in the next, month or two with winter and ground freezing coming up. I think it'll give us some time to do that. But just a comment.
So what do you want to do? You want to hold over this rewrite until December? That's the next time we meet. Or do you want to send it back to council? And do we have to have a public hearing? I don't know that I heard a yes or a no to that.
I think we do have to have another public hearing and then a first reading again, and then it would go to a second reading.
I think, Aaron, if you don't mind me jumping in there, I think put the policy question aside for a moment. As far as the public hearing goes, if we make no substantive changes to the ordinance, we do not have to have another public hearing. If we do make a substantive change, including changing accessory structure requirements for accessory structures in a district, I think that would meet a definition of a substantive change to the ordinance, and it would require another public hearing. From a policy standpoint, and forgive me for weighing in on this outside of the specifics, there are a number of issues that there are a number of areas the current ordinance is problematic. And one that we're going to be dealing with imminently is a proposed cell tower in the downtown area. And because we don't have an ordinance that's updated compliant with Wisconsin's mobile tower siting guidelines, we're going to have to do what we can within the existing zoning ordinance. From the standpoint of your zoning administrator, I hope this doesn't sound too pathetic. I would love to have this ordinance adopted yesterday, and if not yesterday, tonight. And if we can't do it tonight, tomorrow, because there are these conflicts in the ordinance that are problematic from an administration and a legal defensibility standpoint. So that's my pathetic staff lament.
So with that comment, we could roll the change that I just described as a minor tweak, and you described it as a substantive change. We could roll that into the second round of revisions, correct?
Absolutely. And again, I don't know what is planned for the East Gateway area in the comp plan. So, but I suspect we're going to be looking at revisions in that area as a result of the comp plan, which doesn't mean we can't do it now. And it's certainly, let me back up. If the issue is the accessory structures as we described with the Schmidt boat lifts proposal, I'm comfortable with the Plan Commission adopting the differentiation as policy until we codify it within the code. So if the policy is that accessory structures will be held to a different standard than principal structures, as long as we're consistent with the application of that policy, we're fine.
Okay, so it sounds like we can kick this back to council right away without a public hearing November 4th, next Wednesday.
And that would be a first reading.
That's correct.
So
Now, is this something we could waive the second reading on too?
I think we could. I'm not sure with this being as big of a, I don't think we'd want to. There's got to be some pretty substantial reasons. And I just in talking about waiving readings in the past, I think in this scenario, with it being as big of a document and as big of a change as it is, I think we'd be prudent to have a second reading.
So we did make a motion at city council to bring it back to city planning. So I guess we would then need a motion to send it to city council. So anybody want to make that motion?
I'll
I'll
make
make the motion. I'll second Eric's.
Okay, motion by Eric, second by Alan, that we send the chapter 17 zoning rewrite back to the council for their decision in the first reading at our next meeting. Any discussion? All in favor, signify by saying aye.
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 Against? Motion carries.
Guys, I wasn't doing my job. I forgot I'm doing these sheets. Who motioned and who seconded? Sorry.
Eric and Alan.
Thank you.
Yep. Okay. You waited just long enough. If you would have waited another minute, I would have forgot. Okay, next up we have discussion items. You have the comprehensive plan update, and this is the review community vitality chapter. Is this Andrew? I see him bring his face up here. So
I'm back from hiding. Oh man. All right. Well, I am, let's see, I'm going to see if I can share my screen. Whoops, that didn't work.
There we go. We can see that.
You can see my screen?
Yep.
All right, cool.
Yep.
Always get confused between Zoom and, so can you still see my screen?
Yes.
Okay. I get confused between Zoom and Teams. All right. Well, this is going to be kind of light. I guess first off, with the date getting changed back and not meeting our regular time, I got a little, I was not able to pull together the draft chapter for prior to the meeting, but I did put together a presentation that captures some of the highlights, kind of executive summary. So I was going to go through this chapter, and then I'll keep it pretty high level and move through this fairly quickly, and then I'll conclude with just some discussion on next steps and kind of a timeline for wrapping this project up. So what I did here in one of my little pet peeves with comprehensive plans is that they're too long and nobody ever reads them, and there's way too many chapters and they're really boring to read. And so I've tried to do here is kind of lump some things together into a chapter just to make the document a little bit more readable, digestible. So we're still going to cover all our bases as far as meeting the statutory requirements for a comp plan. I've just lump some different things. So I've got there'll be three, what I'm proposing here is just have three subsections within the community vitality chapter. And I'll go through those right now. The first, and we have some high level goals that we'd come up with earlier in the process. I tweaked or kind of modified a few of them. But really the overall goal for the natural resources is preserve, restore the parks, trails, and natural environment to ensure a high quality of life and maintain the attractiveness of the community. Some of the issues and opportunities that we've identified through our survey, through our focus groups, through discussions with staff, trails and bicycle infrastructure. I think that came out as one of the top things in the comprehensive outdoor rec plan survey. A lot of the trails and bicycle related strategies were addressed in the transportation chapter. So but I will still cross-reference them under this in this chapter. Natural areas and wetlands, water quality, maintenance of facilities versus I want to focus on maintaining. Talking to Andrew, one of the things he mentioned was a bit of a focus on maintaining existing assets and really thinking strategically about new facilities. And then also looking at programs and facilities for, not just for younger people, middle-aged people. We typically think of both parks, but for older people as well. So some of the strategies, and so each of these strategies will have actions underneath them that'll elaborate in more detail. But one of them that kind of came out was protecting and restoring Waupaca's water quality. So part of this is kind of a series of, part of this is, I know the city's intending to put together a inland lakes management plan, which will be working with, I believe, Shadow Lake and Mirror Lake Association, the city, probably the DNR, the consultant, to identify a lake management plan. That'll likely include some recommendations with regard to stormwater runoff and best management practices and other strategies to improve water quality. So that sort of falls under number one. Number two is one that really kind of could potentially fall under number three. I broke it out as a separate strategy, and that was kind of looking at that current river edge trail network system and the amount of green space and open space that you have in the city, and looking at perhaps developing a longer range plan or vision to connect these greenways in conjunction with the trail planning you're doing. So rather than just look at the trail planning from solely from a trails perspective, look at how you can stitch together a system of greenways, which essentially you already have. But I think in looking at some of the other plans you have in place, looking at, you clearly have an opportunity to leverage the outdoor recreation. It's talked about in the Riverfront Park Master Plan, and it seems to be, it ties into the city's kind of chain to main branding strategies. So the thought with number 2 is kind of taking a look at that, connecting the greenways in conjunction with the Trails Master Plan that you're going to be putting together. Number 3 is kind of that'll get sort of condensed down, but it's really just focus on maintaining your existing system. And that's so action items under that'll include sort of the implementation of the comprehensive outdoor rec plan, the implementation of Waupaca Riverfront Park Master Plan. One of the things that came out in our surveys and feedback was the need or desire for more year-round facilities and programs, so whether that's, that could touch on the need for, there's been some needs or expressed for, as you guys have mentioned, and things for people to do in the winter. And then finally, looking at neighborhood parks as the city grows. So in our future land use map, we are identifying potential growth areas. So I think as the city grows and as you see more growth, then that's the opportunity to look at new neighborhood parks. It seems to me, if I'm reading the tea leaves correctly, you're doing pretty well in terms of regional parks, community parks, large parks, but there certainly could be a need for smaller neighborhood parks as the city grows. Under community facilities, and this is looking at sort of mostly public works related stuff. I did an inventory of other community facilities. A lot of those are not assets or facilities maintained by the city, but rather by private sector, right? So the hospital, for example. But the focus is, in terms of strategizing, is a little bit more focused on community public works, essentially. Providing effective, efficient utilities and community facilities that ensure a high quality of life for residents. And so under here, some of the issues that got brought up. Internet service has been brought up as an issue out in the East Gate. I mean, I think internet just has to be an issue that communities are looking at top of mind, and try to be competitive and grow. So I think that's something that is an issue. Recycling and compost facility, we talked about, that could be an issue because in the land use plan, I'm recommending you guys take a look at that site as a potential redevelopment site. Waste and recycling, in talking to Justin, he indicated that he was intending to go out and do like an RFP to potentially look at coming up with a citywide contract for waste and recycling. Right now, you've got multiple vendors, each providing those services. So if you go to a city-let contract, you have an opportunity to probably bring costs down, improve services, and reduce wear and tear on your streets. Nitrate levels at the city wells was one of the issues on the south side of the city that, is, I think, is a minor issue, but one worth just keeping on the radar screen. The new public works facility, which I think is already kind of in works. Bringing additional private sector systems and wells onto city infrastructure is something that Justin's has as a priority as those systems fail. And then healthcare, probably daycare should be on here as well. We heard when we did some of our surveys that, and we met with some of our focus group individuals, that healthcare could be a challenge in Waupaca, and it's probably something, while the city's not going to step in and run its own hospital, it's something we want to be proactive on. So attracting and retaining qualified staff was brought up as a concern or an issue. And again, I think there could be a proactive strategy to sort of engage that issue more proactively. Healthcare and survey, Jesus. Daycare, I think, is one thing we heard as a strength in terms of sunny day daycare, but there may also that, daycare is obviously another huge issue that ties into workforce development. And then energy and sustainability. When we did our visioning session and some of the feedback we got through the survey, there was an interest in seeing the city take a little bit stronger stance in terms of energy conservation, renewable energy, kind of embracing that, some more green strategies. So those are some of the issues and opportunities. And again, these are some of the strategies that I sort of put together. And again, under each of these strategies will be some action items that'll address those issues. So improving waste and recycling services, continuing to invest in the city's water, sanitary, and stormwater infrastructure, promoting and taking leadership on green infrastructure, energy efficiency, renewable energy, supporting the preservation, development of quality healthcare and daycare. So those are some of the high-level strategies that sort of came out of this. And then finally, sort of arts and culture. These are some goals taken from the city's arts and culture plan that you guys developed, I think, in 2017. Some of the issues related to arts and culture, economic development, and the opportunity to leverage the arts and culture to attract business and young people, engaging youth, and in particular, drugs came up as a big issue in the community, and I know there's interest in engaging youth around mental health issues, drugs, trying to create positive outlets for kids besides maybe sports, or in addition to, say, sports and other positive things kids can be doing, learning to play music, engaging in the arts, quality of life, strengthening connections between different groups, and public-private partnerships. So some of the strategies discussed here: updating the city's cultural plans, supporting the growth of placemaking, public art and cultural events, which I think is happening, supporting the development of an arts facility. So what exactly support means, I don't think the comp plan is going to come out and say, financially support, but I think that's not the direction that I'm taking it. At least it would be more of a little bit more general description of supporting the intent behind that, but not putting the city on the hook to, financially do that themselves. And then leveraging the arts and culture assets to attract and retain businesses. So I guess before I get into the timeline, that was a quick little overview. Everyone's burnt out from 2 hours of intense discussion on zoning. Does anybody have any, I don't know, it's a little hard to digest this, I realize, kind of late at night here without having read the chapter, but any initial thoughts or feedback for me at this point?
It's very comprehensive. I like what I'm seeing.
Okay, well, thanks, Alan.
Yeah, interesting. I do like the discussion that we could have on these items. Interesting. I think Aaron or Justin made the comment last time that if you're, as many years as I've been at City Hall, things seem to duplicate themselves sometimes, and it's interesting to see the discussion on these items. And I guess I was thinking too, there's one alder that we probably are happy is not on city planning if we're talking about parks and expanding parks and green space. So, and it's interesting too to talk about regional parks or neighborhood parks, because we actually sold a neighborhood park just not too many years ago. So I like neighborhood parks. I think they're cool, and so again, I guess I'm just making my point that these are items that have been discussed in the past, and either in the negative or in the positive they've gone. But it's always good to rediscuss those things.
Yeah. Well, and one of the things that I want to do, like, as we really wrap this plan up and I put it together, and said, one of the things I want to do is the whole point of doing this comprehensive plan, right, is to look at things comprehensively. So I'm going to put together some diagrams. I want to get a nice aerial photo. I want to transpose on there some of the future land uses that we're proposing. I want to put on there some of the trail information we already have. I want to identify some of the future growth areas. And then I think, like, for example, when it comes to neighborhood parks, you know, the area out by where Swiderski's doing that Timber Ridge development. So we're going to have, you know, 130, 140 housing units out there not too shortly. If we extend that road, there's like a 40-acre parcel out there in the town of Farmington, I think. Or is that Lind?
Farmington.
That's Farmington. Okay. At any rate, you know, there's growth potential out there. You already have, you know, obviously the golf course is a great recreational asset if you golf, but not everybody golfs. So, you know, I think there could be an opportunity to take a look at that area of the city potential in the future as an area that, you know, may benefit from having a park or some trail connections as we grow into that area. I think that's one of the areas that the city, you know, will likely grow. Not sure if I had anything else. I thought I had something else to say there, but that might have been, yeah. Oh, yeah. So anyways, I'm going to just kind of jump to this last slide. So this is kind of what we're looking at as far as the timeline goes here, if folks are comfortable with this. So I don't think we're meeting in November. Is that correct?
This is our November meeting. Yeah.
This is our November meeting, even though we're not in November. So my thought was, so that's kind of the, I'll get that community vitality chapter done here in the next couple of weeks. I'll send it to you all so you have a chance to look at it. By December 2nd would be our next regular plan commission meeting, according to my calendar. That I would present that draft plan. I'll probably try to present it as if I'm presenting it to the public. It's kind of a dry run, but we'll give you a copy of that draft plan. We'll put together a nice presentation. Who knows? I guess who knows if we'll be back in person by then. I might try to. I'd like to put together a couple posters or something, you know, visual for people to digest it. Then there's a 30-day requirement to notice a public hearing. So we could have a public hearing on the 5th of January at our following Plan Commission meeting on the 6th, which is also my birthday, Day of the Kings. Plan Commission could recommend adoption. And then City Council could then enact an ordinance adopting the plan as early as the 19th, if there weren't any, you know, if there wasn't any major concerns with it.
Good.
Well, January 6th is my sister-in-law's birthday too. So.
Okay, great. Yeah. Yeah, I guess the one other thing I mentioned is, so, and Aaron and I talked about in December. So there's another chapter or element that comp plans typically hit on. That's intergovernmental coordination. So in December, we talked about me attending one of Aaron's quarterly networking meetings with the town chairs that he facilitates or someone facilitates. And so having a little bit of discussion with input from some of the towns, maybe flagging what could be some key issues or opportunities over the next 10 years.
Andrew?
All right.
Yeah.
Thank you. Anybody else have any comments or questions for Andrew? Thank you for putting them into pictures for us, Andrew. That's helpful.
I'm going to make this thing especially when we put it out to the public. I'm going to try to make it pretty visual because it's a lot. It's hard for people to digest this stuff.
Yep. No, I agree. All right. Well, thank you.
Yeah, thanks.
Maybe we'll let Andrew go first one of these times, so we're on our agenda. Next up, we have under discussion items, we have the update on the business incentive program. The BIP.
Mayor, I was gonna suggest on this, if okay with you, and if not, I can certainly explain it. But I was gonna suggest maybe tabling this, given the length of this meeting and given the fact that we have 3 council members or out of the 4 on this, and they're gonna see this presentation next week. Are you okay with that?
Yeah, as long as Tracy's okay with it.
Tracy, if you're not, that's fine.
No, that sounds fine to me.
Okay. And if Tracy, if you want to hear more about it, I'll actually bring it back at a later time, hopefully a shorter meeting, and we'll talk about it with more commissioners here.
That sounds great.
Awesome.
I appreciate your concern, but there are only 2 council members on the commission. Well,
2 council
I
members
guess
and 1
the
mayor.
yeah, the mayor. And all right.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't count. All right. Okay. Knowing that, we're going to just bring that right to council. Let's go to reports then. This would be the development update.
Yeah. So, guys, not much has changed really because we had a meeting like 2.5, 3 weeks ago or whatever it was. Green Tree housing development continues to move forward. We are dealing with some erosion kind of control issues, but we're working through that with Green Tree and that Woodland Park Estate subdivision. Justin, myself, Jane, Elizabeth, and Liz are working through those things. So addressing those issues. Presto Rail, as you saw, was tabled tonight. We expect that to come forward in December for development. And then we actually know that they've gotten their state plans approved for phase 2, which is actually a building addition, which we won't see anytime in the next month or 2, but we do expect to see that in the next year and a half. Those state plans, once they're approved, are good for, I believe, 2 years. We also, just as far as, I kind of keep this thing I'm looking at, it's a list of conversations, ongoing conversations with commercial development prospects. And although I'm not going to share a lot of detail, I can tell you that list is not 0. That list is a decent amount of bullet points long. So that's a good thing. People are still interested in having conversations about commercial projects in the city. I know I say that once in a while. Some of these are slow moving. We do hope to bring something forward on those bullet points soon. And then we have a couple initiatives that we're working through, just updates on those. As a part of this business incentive program, I'm going to bring forward reconstituting the CDA. We found out kind of in researching our CDA that we're kind of not compliant with state statutes. So we want to make sure that our members on that CDA are compliant with state statutes. So we'll look at bringing forward something in maybe November on appointing new members. And then Noah Lenke's marketing videos that he's creating. And we're working with him on just marketing the whole area, using the branding guidelines, the chain to main concept. He has went from shooting the videos to editing them, and he's created a web page that he's kind of landing them all on. It's going to be a 50 video series. We're then going to work with a marketing specialist and then invest a little bit of money in partnership with the school district in social media advertising to attract people to our area. And I can tell you, I'm not going to share all the videos until it's kind of a done project, because I think it'll be better that way. But I mean, it should be no surprise that his videos make Waupaca look like a pretty great place. So I'm excited to have that nearing completion. That's all I have, Mayor.
All right. Anybody else have anything for the good of the meeting? All right. We'd be looking for a motion to adjourn.
Move to adjourn, Olson.
I'll second Tracy.
Motion by Olson, second by Barrett, that we adjourn till our next meeting, which it looks like is Wednesday, December 2nd. All in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Against? Motion carried. We're adjourned at 7:22 p.m. Have a great night, everybody.
Good
All right.
meeting. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, guys.
Here.
Aye.
Bye.